I will never forget the sound of my suitcases hitting the porch floor. It was a dull, hollow thud, like something inside me had collapsed at the exact same moment. The snow was falling slowly, almost gently, as if the sky itself pitied me. But my husband, Marcelo, did not. He changed the locks. He left my things outside, and when I stood there, pounding on the door, screaming, begging, crying his name until my throat burned, he never even opened the window. He never looked at me, not once. That is how I lost my home, in the middle of winter, on the coldest night of the year. But what broke me, what truly shattered every piece of who I thought I was realizing that I had already lost my marriage a long time ago. I just hadn't known it yet. My name is Anna. I am 34 years old, and until that January night, I believed I knew exactly who I was. I was Marcelo's wife. I was the woman who woke up early to make coffee, who kept everything clean and organized, who waited for him to come home with dinner already on the table. I was the keeper of our home on Azalea Street. That was my identity. That was my life. We married young. I was 26. He was 28. It was summer. I wore a simple lace dress. He cried at the altar. I thought that was love. Maybe it was, in the beginning, but years pass. People change, or maybe they just stop pretending. He started working later, coming home later, speaking less, smiling less. I would ask him if everything was okay, and he would say he was just tired, and I believed him, because it was easier to believe than to face the truth that was sitting right there, staring at me, waiting for me to finally see it. But that night, standing on that porch with snow gathering on my shoulders, with my breath coming out in sharp white clouds, with my fingers going numb from the cold, I could no longer ignore it. I could no longer pretend. The door was locked. My clothes were outside. And the man I had spent 8 years loving, sacrificing for, building a life with, was inside that house, warm and safe, while I froze on the porch that used to be mine. I remember sitting down on the top step. I remember the snow covering my hair, melting against my neck, soaking through my coat. I remember the lights inside glowing warm and golden, mocking me. I remember thinking, this cannot be real. This cannot be my life. But it was. It was my life, and it was ending right there, in the cold, in the dark, alone. I banged on the door until my knuckles were raw. I called his name until my voice cracked. I waited until I could not feel my feet anymore. And then I dragged my suitcases down the steps, through the snow, down Azalea Street, away from the only home I had known for almost a decade, away from the man who had promised to love me forever, away from the life I thought I was living. I did not know where I was going. I just knew I could not stay there. Not on that porch. Not in that cold. Not in that rejection. So I walked, and with every step, I felt myself breaking a little more. The snow kept falling. The street was empty. No one saw me. No one stopped me. No one asked if I was okay. And maybe that was the worst part. Realizing that I could disappear into the night, into the cold, into the pain, and the world would just keep turning, as if I had never existed at all. Before that night, I thought I knew what my life was. I thought I had built something solid, something real, something that would last. But looking back now, I see the cracks. I see the moments I ignored. I see the slow, quiet unraveling that I refused to acknowledge, because acknowledging it would mean admitting that I had been wrong. About him. About us. About everything. We met when I was 24. He was charming, confident. He had plans. He wanted to build a career, buy a house, start a family. He said he wanted to build it all with me, and I believed him. Why wouldn't I? He looked at me like I was the only person in the room. He held my hand in public. He introduced me to his friends, his family. He made me feel seen, wanted, loved. We got married 2 years later. It was a small ceremony. Nothing fancy. Just close family and a few friends. I wore a dress I found on sale. He wore a suit his father had lent him. We exchanged vows in a little chapel on the edge of town. He cried when he saw me walk down the aisle. I thought that meant something. I thought it meant he loved me. Maybe he did. Or maybe he loved the idea of me. The idea of a wife. A home. A life that looked perfect from the outside. The first few years were good. Or at least I thought they were. We moved into the house on Azalea Street. It was small but cozy. 2 bedrooms, a little yard, a porch with a swing. I painted the walls. I planted flowers. I made it ours. Or so I thought. But the house was only in his name. He said it was easier that way. For taxes. For the mortgage. For reasons I did not understand but accepted because I trusted him. I stayed home. I did not work. He said we did not need the money, and he wanted me to focus on the house. On us. On eventually having children. So I did. I woke up early. I made breakfast. I cleaned. I cooked. I waited. I became the kind of woman I never thought I would be. The kind who waits. Who adjusts. Who shrinks herself to fit into someone else's plans. And slowly, so slowly I did not even notice it happening. He started pulling away. He worked longer hours. He stopped coming home for lunch. He stopped asking about my day. He stopped touching me. Not all at once. Just gradually. A little less each week. Until one day I realized we had not kissed in months. We had not made love in even longer. We shared a bed. But we were strangers. I tried to talk to him. I tried to ask what was wrong. He would brush me off. Say he was stressed. Say work was demanding. Say he just needed space. And I gave it to him. I gave him everything he asked for. I gave him silence when he wanted quiet. I gave him distance when he pulled away. I gave him patience when he stopped trying. I gave and gave and gave until there was nothing left of me, until I was just an echo in that house, a shadow, a woman who existed only to serve a man who no longer saw her. I should have known. The signs were all there. The late nights, the phone calls he took in another room, the cologne I did not recognize, the receipts I found in his pockets, a necklace, expensive, that I never received, a dinner reservation, for 2, that we never went to, but I did not ask. I did not confront him, because deep down, I knew, and knowing would mean losing everything. So I chose ignorance. I chose hope. I chose to believe that if I just kept being good, kept being patient, kept being the perfect wife, he would come back to me. But he never did. And on that January night, when I came home early from my sister's house, when I saw my suitcases on the porch, when I realized he had changed the locks, I understood. He was never coming back, because he had already left, a long time ago. And I had been living in a house with a ghost, loving a man who no longer existed, holding on to a marriage that had died quietly, slowly, without me even noticing, until the cold forced me to see it, until the snow covered my denial, until I had no choice but to face the truth. I had lost everything, and I had no one to blame but myself. The message came the next morning. I was sitting in a coffee shop 2 blocks from Azalea Street, my hands wrapped around a cup I could not afford, my suitcases still damp from the snow, leaning against the table like silent witnesses to my humiliation. My phone buzzed. I saw his name, and for one stupid, desperate second, I thought maybe he had changed his mind. Maybe he was calling to apologize, to let me back in, to say it was all a terrible mistake. But it was not an apology. It was a statement. Cold, legal, final. The house is mine. I paid for it. You have no legal claim to anything. My lawyer will be in contact. I read those words 3 times before they sank in. The house is mine, not ours. Mine. As if I had never lived there. As if 8 years of my life, of cooking his meals and washing his clothes and holding his hand through his mother's funeral, meant nothing. As if I had been a guest, a temporary tenant, someone he could evict whenever it suited him. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the phone across the room, but I just sat there, staring at the screen, feeling my chest tighten, feeling the walls close in, feeling the ground drop out from under me, because he was right. Legally, he was right. The house was in his name, only his name. I had not worked in years. I had no savings, no income, no proof of contribution. I had trusted him, and trust, I learned that morning, means nothing in a courtroom. I called my sister, Julia. My voice shook so badly I could barely speak. She told me to come over. She told me not to stay in that coffee shop. She told me I was not alone, but I was. I was more alone than I had ever been in my entire life. I dragged my suitcases through the streets. The snow had stopped, but the cold had not. My fingers were numb. My face burned from the wind. People walked past me without looking. A woman struggling with 2 heavy bags in the freezing cold, and no one stopped. No one asked if I needed help. I was invisible. I had always been invisible. I just had not realized it until now. It took me 40 minutes to reach Julia's house. By the time I got there, I could not feel my feet. She opened the door, took one look at me, and pulled me inside. She did not ask questions. She just held me, and I broke. I collapsed into her arms and sobbed until there was nothing left inside me but emptiness. Later, when I could finally breathe again, she told me what I already knew. I had no legal rights to the house. No claim. No leverage. Marcelo had consulted a lawyer months ago. He had planned this. Every step. Every detail. While I was making his dinner, he was plotting my removal. While I was sleeping beside him, he was preparing to erase me. And there was more. There was always more. He had been seeing someone else. For months. Maybe longer. A woman from his office. Younger. Prettier. Someone with a career. With ambition. With a life that did not revolve around waiting for a man to come home. Someone who was everything I was not. Julia showed me the photos. She had found them online. Social media. Public posts. Marcelo and this woman at a restaurant. At a park. Smiling. Holding hands. Looking at each other the way he used to look at me. Before I became furniture. Before I became invisible. I stared at those pictures and felt something inside me die. Not my love for him. That had died months ago. I just had not admitted it. What died was my belief that I had mattered, that I had been worth something, that the years I had given him had meant anything at all. He had not just replaced me, he had erased me, as if I had never existed. As if our marriage had been a rough draft, he crumpled up and threw away the moment he found a better version. And the worst part, the part that made me want to disappear entirely, was that I had let him. I had made myself small. I had silenced my own voice. I had turned myself into someone so easy to discard that he did not even hesitate. Julia tried to comfort me. She said I would recover. She said I would rebuild. She said this was not the end. But sitting there in her living room, staring at pictures of my husband with another woman, I could not imagine a future. I could not imagine recovering. I could only imagine the cold, the rejection, the emptiness. And I wondered if this was how my life would end. Not with love, not with purpose, but with snow and silence and the bitter understanding that I had wasted 8 years loving a man who had never truly loved me back. Julia's couch became my bed. Her living room became my prison. I slept there every night for weeks, curled under a thin blanket, listening to her children wake up crying, listening to her husband's footsteps in the kitchen, listening to the whispers they thought I could not hear, whispers about how long I would stay, about how much space I was taking, about how they had not signed up for this. I tried to make myself small, smaller than I already was. I woke up before everyone else. I folded my blanket and hid it in the closet. I stayed quiet. I offered to cook, to clean, to help with the kids. I tried to be useful, to earn my place, to prove I was not a burden. But I was. I knew I was. And so did they. Julia never said it. She was too kind. But her husband, Tom, was not. He did not have to say anything. I saw it in his face, in the way he looked at me, in the way he sighed when he walked past the couch, in the way he closed the bedroom door a little too hard. I was in the way. I was a problem, a charity case, a woman who had failed at the one thing she was supposed to do: keep her husband, keep her home, keep her life together. The people in Julia's neighborhood noticed. Of course they did. Small towns do not forget. They do not forgive. They gossip. They judge. They whisper behind your back and smile to your face. I saw them staring when I walked to the corner store. I heard them talking when they thought I was out of earshot. Poor Anna, left by her husband. Nowhere to go. Sleeping on her sister's couch. How sad. How pathetic. How predictable. I stopped going outside. I stopped answering my phone. I stopped looking at myself in the mirror. Because every time I did, I saw someone I did not recognize. A woman with hollow eyes, with greasy hair, with clothes that did not fit anymore because I had stopped eating. I had stopped caring. I had stopped believing that anything I did mattered. Julia tried to help. She brought me job listings. She encouraged me to apply. She told me I needed to start over, to rebuild, to take control of my life. But I could not. I could not imagine walking into an interview. I could not imagine explaining the gap in my resume. 8 years of nothing. 8 years of being a wife, of being invisible, of being something that no longer existed. I spent my days on that couch, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of my marriage, searching for the exact point where I had lost him. Was it the first time he stayed late at work? The first time he stopped kissing me goodbye? The first time he looked at me like I was a stranger? I went over it again and again, torturing myself, looking for the mistake I had made. The thing I could have done differently. The version of myself that would have been enough. But there was no answer. No single moment. No clear mistake. Just a slow, silent erosion. A marriage that had rotted from the inside while I kept watering the surface, pretending the roots were still alive. At night, I lay awake, listening to Julia and Tom arguing in their bedroom. They tried to keep their voices down, but I heard enough. Enough to know that I was the problem, that my presence was straining their marriage, that they wanted me gone, but did not know how to say it without seeming cruel. And I did not blame them. I wanted me gone too. I thought about leaving, about packing my suitcases and disappearing, about finding a shelter, about sleeping in my car if I still had one. But I had nowhere to go. No money, no plan, no hope. I was stuck, trapped between a past that had rejected me and a future I could not imagine. So I stayed on that couch, in that limbo, in that suffocating, humiliating, soul-crushing existence, waiting for something to change, waiting for some sign that my life was not over, that I was not broken beyond repair, that somewhere, somehow, there was still a version of me worth saving. But the days passed, and nothing changed, and I started to believe that maybe this was it. Maybe this was all I deserved. A couch, a blanket, a life lived in the margins of someone else's home, a woman who had loved too much, trusted too easily, and lost everything. A woman who did not know who she was anymore. A woman who was not sure she ever had. It was Julia who finally forced me out of the house. She walked into the living room one Saturday morning, pulled the blanket off me, and said we were going out. I protested. I told her I was not ready. I told her I did not want to see people. I told her I just wanted to be left alone. But she would not listen. She said I had been rotting on that couch for 3 weeks, and if I stayed there one more day, I would disappear completely. And maybe part of me wanted to disappear. Maybe that would have been easier. But Julia would not let me. So I went. She took me to a charity fair at the local church. I did not want to go. I did not want to be around people. I did not want to smile and pretend I was okay when everything inside me was broken. But Julia held my arm and walked me through the doors, past the tables of handmade crafts and baked goods, past the families laughing and the children running, past all the noise and warmth and life that I no longer felt part of. There was a donation drive happening in the back of the church hall. Blankets, winter coats, clothes for people who had lost everything. I stood there staring at those piles of donated items and felt a strange, bitter kinship with them. Discarded things. Things people no longer wanted. Things that had been replaced. That is when I saw him. He was organizing boxes near the far wall. Tall but hunched. Like he was carrying something heavy that no one else could see. Dark hair. A little messy. A beard that looked like it had not been trimmed in weeks. Hands that were rough. Calloused. The kind of hands that had worked hard for a long time. He wore a faded flannel shirt and jeans with dirt on the knees. He looked tired, but not broken, just worn, like he had survived something, and was still standing. I do not know why, but I could not stop watching him. Maybe it was the way he moved. Slow, deliberate, like every box he lifted mattered, like every blanket he folded was for someone specific, someone real, someone who needed it. And then he looked up. Our eyes met, and something in his expression changed. Not pity, not curiosity, just recognition, like he saw something in me that I thought I had hidden, like he knew. He walked over. I wanted to leave. I wanted to turn around and walk out of that church and never come back, but my legs would not move, so I just stood there, trembling, even though the church was warm, even though there was no reason to be cold. He stopped in front of me, holding a cup of coffee. Steam rising from it, the smell of it bitter and comforting at the same time. He held it out to me. "Here," he said. His voice was quiet, gentle. "It's hot." I shook my head. "I'm fine. I don't need it." "I know," he said. And he smiled. Just a little. Just enough. But take it anyway. I do not know why I did. Maybe because no one had offered me anything in weeks. Maybe because his eyes were kind. Maybe because I was so tired of saying no to everything, even kindness. So I took the cup, and the warmth of it spread through my hands, up my arms, into my chest. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something other than cold, something other than numb. "Thank you," I whispered. He nodded. Did not ask my name, did not ask what I was doing there, did not ask why I was shaking. He just nodded, like he understood without needing to know. And then he walked back to his boxes, back to his work, back to folding blankets for strangers. Julia came over a few minutes later. She saw the cup in my hands. She saw the man across the room. She raised an eyebrow but did not say anything. She just smiled, and I hated that she smiled, because I knew what she was thinking. And I was not ready for that. I was not ready for hope. I was not ready to believe that anything good could happen to me ever again. But the coffee was warm, and for the first time in 3 weeks, I did not feel completely invisible. Someone had seen me. Someone had noticed. And even though it was just a cup of coffee, even though it meant nothing, it felt like something, like a crack in the wall I had built around myself, like a tiny, fragile thread pulling me back toward the world I had been trying to leave behind. We stayed at the fair for another hour. I did not talk to him again, but I saw him, working, helping, smiling at the elderly woman who thanked him for carrying her donation to her car, kneeling down to tie a little boy's shoe. Small gestures, quiet acts of care, and I wondered who he was, what his story was, why he was there. And for the first time in weeks, I wondered about someone other than myself. And maybe that was the beginning, not of healing, not yet, but of something small, something that might, eventually, grow into hope. 3 days later, someone knocked on Julia's door. I was on the couch, as usual, staring at nothing, wrapped in my blanket like it was armor. Julia answered. I heard her voice, surprised, polite, and then she called my name. I did not want to get up. I did not want to see anyone. But Julia insisted, so I dragged myself to the door, still wrapped in my blanket, my hair unwashed, my face pale and hollow. And there he was, the man from the church, Raphael, though I did not know his name yet. He was holding a cardboard box, a big one. He looked uncomfortable, like he was not sure he should be there, like he had almost turned around 3 times before knocking. "Hi," he said. His voice was the same, quiet, careful. "I'm Raphael. We met at the church. These clothes were left over from the donation drive. I thought maybe you or your sister might know someone who could use them." Julia took the box, thanked him. He nodded, gave a small awkward wave and left, just like that. No questions, no explanation, no expectation. Julia closed the door and set the box on the kitchen table. She opened it, and we both stared. Inside were winter coats, thick ones, new ones, still had tags on them, sweaters, scarves, gloves, all in my size, all in colors I would wear, navy blue, gray, black, nothing flashy, nothing pitying, just warm, just practical, just exactly what I needed. Julia looked at me. These didn't come from the donation drive. I said nothing. I just stared at the box, at the care that had gone into it, at the lie he had told to spare me the humiliation of charity, at the kindness of a stranger who did not know me, did not owe me anything, but had seen me shivering in a warm church and decided to do something about it. I reached into the box and pulled out one of the coats. It was soft, lined with fleece, the kind of coat that costs money, the kind of coat someone buys for themselves, not for strangers. I held it against my chest and felt something crack inside me. Not break, just crack, like ice in the sun, slow, painful, inevitable. And then I cried. Not the loud, desperate crying I had done the night Marcello kicked me out, not the silent, hollow crying I had done on Julia's couch, but something else, something I did not have a name for. Tears that were not just sadness, tears that were gratitude, confusion, disbelief, because I could not understand why a stranger would care, why someone I did not know would go out of his way to help me, why anyone would see me, broken and invisible, and think I was worth saving. Julia hugged me. She did not say anything, She just held me while I cried into that coat. And when I finally stopped, when I finally pulled myself together, I asked her a question I did not want to know the answer to. Why would he do that? Julia smiled. Maybe because he knows what it's like. I did not understand. Not yet. But I wore that coat the next day, and the day after that, and every day for weeks. And every time I put it on, I thought about him, about Raphael, about the man who folded blankets for strangers, about the quiet kindness in his eyes, about the way he had not asked for anything in return. And I wondered if maybe, just maybe, there were still good people in the world, people who gave without expecting, people who cared without needing a reason. I did not see him again for a while, but the coat stayed, and the crack in the ice stayed, and slowly, without me even realizing it, I started to thaw, not all at once, not dramatically, just a little, just enough to remember that I was still alive, that I still had feeling, that somewhere, buried beneath all the pain and humiliation and loss, there was still a part of me that wanted to survive, that wanted to keep going, that wanted, against all logic and reason, to believe that maybe my life was not over, maybe I was not broken beyond repair, maybe there was still something left worth fighting for, even if I did not know what it was yet, even if I could not see it, even if all I had was a coat from a stranger and a tiny, fragile crack in the ice around my heart. I got a job 3 weeks after Raphael brought me that box of coats. It was not much, just a position at a small coffee shop near the center of town. Minimum wage, long shifts, standing for hours behind a counter, smiling at strangers, pretending I was okay. But it was mine. It was a start. It was proof that I could still do something, that I was not completely useless, that maybe, just maybe, I could rebuild a life from nothing. The coffee shop was called Morning Light. It was the kind of place people stopped at on their way to work. Quick coffee, quick pastry. No one stayed long. No one noticed the girl behind the counter. And I liked it that way. I liked being invisible. I liked the routine, the repetition, the simplicity of making coffee, handing it over, saying thank you, moving on to the next customer. It required nothing of me. No emotion, no vulnerability, no risk. On my 3rd day, he walked in. Raphael. I saw him before he saw me. He was standing near the door, scanning the menu board, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. He wore the same flannel shirt, the same worn jeans. His hair was still messy, his beard still untrimmed, but there was something about him that made me pause, something steady, something safe. And then he looked at me, and he stopped, and for a moment, neither of us moved. We just stared at each other across the small coffee shop, surrounded by the hum of the espresso machine and the low murmur of morning conversations. And I saw it again. That recognition, that quiet understanding, like he knew exactly who I was and what I had been through, even though we had never spoken more than a few words. He walked up to the counter, slowly, like he was giving me time to run if I needed to. "Hi," he said. "Hi," I whispered. "You work here now?" I nodded. I could not find my voice. My throat felt tight. My hands were shaking. I shoved them behind my back so he would not see. "That's good," he said, and he smiled. That same small, careful smile. "That's really good." I did not know what to say, so I just asked him what he wanted. "Black coffee," he said. "Nothing fancy." I made it, my hands still shaking. I handed it to him. He paid, and then he left. Just like that. No questions. No awkward small talk. No pity. He just took his coffee and walked out the door. But the next day, he came back. Same time. Same order. Black coffee. Nothing fancy. He smiled at me. Paid. Left. And the next day. And the next. For 2 weeks, he came in every single morning. Never stayed long. Never asked me anything. Never made me feel uncomfortable. He just ordered his coffee, smiled, and left. And slowly, I started to look forward to it, to seeing him, to that small moment of connection in a job that otherwise felt empty and mechanical. Until one morning, he did not just order and leave. He stood there, holding his coffee, and he asked me a question. "Have you tried the coffee here?" I blinked. I make it. Of course I've tried it. He grinned. A real grin this time. Not careful, not small, just genuine. So tell me, is it actually good? Or are you just selling me overpriced brown water? And I laughed. I actually laughed. For the first time in months. It was not a big laugh. Not loud. Just a small, surprised sound that escaped before I could stop it. But it was real. And it felt like breaking through ice. Like taking a breath after being underwater for too long. It's decent, I said, still smiling. Not the best, but decent. Decent, he repeated, nodding seriously. I can work with decent. And then he did something unexpected. He set his coffee down on the counter and leaned in slightly. Not invasive, not threatening. Just close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. Close enough that I could see the tiredness there, the weight, the history. Can I ask you something? He said, his voice quiet again. I hesitated, then nodded. Are you okay? 3 words. Simple, direct. But they hit me like a fist to the chest. Because no one had asked me that. Not Julia, not Tom, not anyone. They had all tiptoed around me, trying to fix me, trying to help me, but no one had simply asked if I was okay. And I could have lied. I could have said yes. I could have smiled and nodded and sent him on his way, but I did not. I looked at him, at this stranger who had given me a coat and a cup of coffee, and now stood in front of me asking if I was okay. And I told him the truth. No, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I'm not. He nodded, like he had expected that answer. Like he had asked because he already knew. Yeah, he said softly. I didn't think so. He picked up his coffee. And before he left, he said one more thing. It gets better. I know it doesn't feel like it, but it does. And then he walked out, leaving me standing there behind the counter, tears streaming down my face, wondering how a stranger could see me so clearly when I could barely see myself. It was snowing again the night he offered me a ride. Heavy, wet snow that turned the streets into slush and made walking dangerous. My shift had ended late, past 9. The buses had stopped running. I had planned to walk back to Julia's house, even though it was over 2 miles and my coat, warm as it was, would not be enough in weather like this. I was standing outside the coffee shop, staring at the snow, trying to summon the courage to start walking, when I heard a car pull up beside me. I turned. It was Raphael. He rolled down the window. Snowflakes drifted into the car. Need a ride? He asked. I should have said no. I should have told him I was fine, but I was so tired. Tired of pretending. Tired of struggling. Tired of being cold. So I said yes. The inside of his car was warm. An old sedan. Clean, but worn. The heater rattled slightly. There was a smell of coffee and pine. He had a small air freshener hanging from the rearview mirror, shaped like a tree. I focused on it as he drove, trying not to think about how strange this was. Getting into a car with a man I barely knew. Trusting him. Letting him take me somewhere. But I did trust him. I did not know why. I just did. We drove in silence for a while. The windshield wipers beat a steady rhythm against the snow. The radio played something low and instrumental. And then, without really meaning to, I asked the question that had been haunting me for weeks. Why are you so kind to me? He did not answer right away. He kept his eyes on the road, his hands steady on the wheel. And then, finally, he spoke. Because I've been where you are. I turned to look at him. His face was illuminated by the glow of the dashboard. Shadows under his eyes. Lines around his mouth. He looked older than I had thought. Tired. Worn. Like someone who had survived something terrible and was still carrying the scars. What do you mean? I asked. He took a breath, let it out slowly, and then he told me. He had been married once. 7 years. Her name was Caroline. They had a house. Not big, not fancy, but theirs. Or so he thought. When the marriage fell apart, when she told him she had been seeing someone else for over a year, when she told him she wanted him gone, he discovered that the house was in her father's name. He had paid the mortgage. He had fixed the roof. He had painted the walls. But legally he had no claim, no rights, no recourse. She kicked him out, changed the locks, took everything. He spent 6 months living in a shelter, sleeping on a cot surrounded by strangers, eating donated food, showering in communal bathrooms, feeling like he had disappeared, like he was no longer a person, just a body, A problem. A man who had failed. One night, he said, his voice quiet, I was sitting outside the shelter. It was winter. Colder than tonight. I didn't have a coat, just a hoodie. I was shaking so hard I thought my bones would break, and this old man walked by, stopped, looked at me, and he took off his coat and gave it to me. Raphael paused, swallowed hard. I told him I couldn't take it, that he'd freeze, but he said he had another one at home, said he'd be fine, and then he said something I'll never forget. He said, "One day, when you're back on your feet, do this for someone else." I felt tears burning in my eyes. I tried to blink them away, but they came anyway, sliding down my cheeks, dripping onto my hands. That coat kept me alive that winter, Raphael continued. And when I finally got out of that shelter, when I finally got a job and a place to live, I made myself a promise. I'd look for people like me, people who were cold, people who were lost, people who needed someone to see them, and I'd help, however I could. He glanced at me, briefly, then back at the road. That's why I gave you the coat. That's why I come to the coffee shop. Not because I pity you, but because I know. I know what it's like to lose everything, to feel invisible, to wonder if you'll ever be whole again. I could not speak. I could not breathe. I just sat there, crying silently, staring at this man who had suffered and survived and chosen kindness anyway. Does it get better? I finally whispered. Like you said. He nodded. It does. Not all at once. Not easily. But yes, it gets better. He pulled up in front of Julia's house, put the car in park, and before I got out, he turned to me and said one more thing. You're not broken, Anna. You're just hurt, and hurt people heal. It just takes time. I did not know how he knew my name. Maybe Julia had told him. Maybe he had asked someone. It did not matter. What mattered was that someone saw me. Someone understood. Someone had walked the same dark road and made it out alive. And if he could do it, maybe I could too. Spring came slowly that year. The snow melted in patches, leaving the ground muddy and raw. The trees started budding. The air lost its sharp edge. And somewhere in the middle of all that thawing, I realized I was changing too. Not all at once. Not dramatically. But in small, quiet ways that I did not notice until they had already happened. Raphael and I started meeting outside the coffee shop. Not dates, not romance. Just two people who understood each other. We would sit in his car after my shifts and talk. About everything. About nothing. About the things we had lost, and the things we were trying to rebuild. He told me about his job at a construction company. About the house he was saving for. About the life he was building from scratch. And I told him about my marriage. About the humiliation. About the nights I spent on Julia's couch wishing I could disappear. About the fear that I would never be whole again. He listened. He did not try to fix me. He did not offer advice. He just listened. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. One evening, after a particularly long shift, he asked me something I was not expecting. Have you thought about getting your own place? I stared at him. I can't afford that. I barely make enough to help Julia with groceries. There's a studio, he said, a few blocks from here. Small. Cheap. The landlord's a friend of mine. He might work with you on the deposit. I felt my chest tighten. Raphael, I can't. Why not? Because I'll fail, I said, my voice breaking. I'll get the apartment and I won't be able to pay rent and I'll end up on the street and it'll be worse than where I am now. He reached over and took my hand. His palm was rough, warm, steady. You won't fail. You're stronger than you think. And if things get hard, you'll figure it out. You always do. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that I was capable of standing on my own. But the fear was still there. Heavy. Suffocating. The fear that I was too broken. Too damaged. Too weak to survive without someone holding me up. But Raphael did not let go of my hand. He just sat there, holding it, waiting. And slowly, I felt something shift inside me. Not courage, not confidence. Just the smallest flicker of possibility. The idea that maybe, just maybe, I could try. 2 weeks later, I signed the lease. A tiny studio apartment. 400 square feet. One window. A kitchenette that barely fit a stove and a sink. A bathroom so small I could touch both walls at the same time. But it was mine. My name on the lease. My key. My space. Raphael helped me move in. There was not much to move. A few bags of clothes, some dishes Julia had given me, a lamp, a blanket, but it was enough. We spent the afternoon painting the walls, white with pale blue trim. He brought plants, a small succulent for the windowsill, a fern for the corner, and as I stood there, paintbrush in hand, watching him carefully water those plants, I realized something. I was not waiting anymore. I was not hoping for someone to save me. I was not clinging to a past that no longer existed. I was here, in this small, imperfect space, building something. Slowly, carefully, and I was not alone. Raphael was not my savior. He was not my rescuer. He was just a man who had been broken too. A man who understood what it meant to lose everything and have to start over. A man who saw me, not as a project to fix, but as a person worth knowing. And as the weeks passed, as we painted and planted and talked late into the night, I started to feel something I had not felt in years. Not love, not yet, but something close, something warm, something that felt like home. Not the house I had lost, not the marriage that had crumbled, but something deeper. Something that had nothing to do with walls or locks or whose name was on the deed. I started to understand that home was not a place. It was a feeling. It was safety. It was being seen. It was knowing that someone cared whether you made it through the day. And for the first time since that snowy night on Azalea Street, I felt like I was home, not because I had an apartment, but because I had found someone who made me believe I was worth coming home to. Winter came again. 1 year after the night Marcelo locked me out. 1 year after I lost everything. 1 year after I stood on that porch in the snow, broken and shivering, convinced my life was over. But I was not on that porch anymore. I was in my apartment, my small, imperfect, beautiful apartment, and I was not alone. Raphael was sitting on the floor beside me. We had pushed the small couch against the wall to make room. The heater hummed softly in the corner. Snow fell outside the window, slow and steady, covering the street in white, but inside it was warm, safe, quiet. We were drinking hot chocolate, the cheap kind from a packet, but it tasted perfect, because it was ours, because we had made it together, because we were here, alive, whole, despite everything that had tried to break us. I looked at him, at the man who had given me a coat when I was freezing, who had asked if I was okay when no one else did, who had told me his story so I would not feel so alone in mine, who had helped me paint these walls and plant these flowers and believe that I could survive. "Thank you," I said. He looked at me, confused. For what? For seeing me, when I couldn't see myself. He set his mug down, reached over and took my hand. "You were always there, Anna. You just needed time to find yourself again." I felt tears prickling at my eyes, but they were not sad tears, not anymore. They were something else, something I did not have words for. Gratitude, relief, hope, all of it mixed together in a way that felt overwhelming and healing at the same time. "I thought I was going to die that night," I whispered. "The night he locked me out. I thought that was it, that I had lost everything and there was nothing left." Raphael squeezed my hand. "But you didn't die. You survived. And you built this." I looked around the apartment, at the plants on the windowsill, at the paintings we had hung on the walls, at the books stacked on the floor, at the life I had created from nothing, and I realized he was right. I had survived, not because someone saved me, but because I had chosen to keep going, one day at a time, one step at a time, even when I did not believe I could. "I lost a house," I said softly, "but I found a home." Raphael smiled. "Yeah, you did." And then he did something I was not expecting. He leaned over and kissed my forehead, gentle, careful, like I was something precious, something worth protecting. And I felt something inside me finally, completely, break open. Not in a painful way, but in a way that felt like light flooding into a dark room, like breathing after holding your breath for too long, like waking up after a long, terrible dream. I was not the woman who had stood on that porch a year ago. I was not the woman who had slept on Julia's couch, wishing she could disappear. I was not the woman who had believed she was too broken to be loved. I was someone new, someone stronger, someone who would walk through fire and come out on the other side, someone who knew what it meant to lose everything and still find a reason to keep living. The snow kept falling outside, but I was not cold anymore. I was warm. I was safe. I was home, not because of the walls around me, but because of the man beside me, because of the life I had built, because of the woman I had become. I had lost a husband who never truly loved me, but I had found a man who saw me, really saw me, all of me, the broken parts, the scared parts, the parts that were still healing, and he stayed anyway. And I realized something that night, sitting on the floor of my tiny apartment, drinking cheap hot chocolate while snow fell outside. The cold had not destroyed me. It had revealed me. It had stripped away everything that was not real, everything that was not mine, everything that was holding me back. And what was left, what survived, was the truest version of myself, the version that had always been there, waiting, the version that was strong enough to start over, brave enough to trust again, whole enough to love again. I did not need rescuing. I needed time. I needed kindness. I needed someone to remind me that I was worth fighting for, and I had found that, not in a house, not in a marriage, but in myself, and in the quiet, steady presence of a man who understood what it meant to be broken and chose to rebuild anyway. The woman who froze on that porch a year ago was gone, and in her place was someone new, someone who had been reborn from the cold, someone who knew that home was not a place. It was a feeling, and I was finally, truly, home.